Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. The news cycle can often feel like a blur, leaving us with more questions than answers. But what happens when that blur crystallizes into something as stark, as shocking, as a political assassination? What does the murder of a figure like Charlie Kirk truly tell us about the state of our discourse and our society today? That's really what we're here to explore. On September 10th, Charlie Kirk was tragically shot and killed. This happened at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, during a Turning Point USA event. Right now, police have no suspect in custody. And federal and state authorities, they're calling it a likely targeted political assassination. The reaction was, well, immediate and widespread. President Trump ordered flags to half-staff calling Kirk legendary, and leaders from across the political spectrum condemned the attack. So today, we're taking a close look at an article from The Economist, but also bringing in some crucial background material. Our goal isn't just to, summarize what happened. We want to really dig into the core arguments, maybe challenge some of the framing, and bring in that deeper context. We want to help you understand what's truly at stake here for all of us. Okay, so let's start by understanding Charlie Kirk's journey a bit. He was just 18, right? Famously dropped out of university to launch Turning Point USA, TPUSA. And that organization, it really quickly became America's most prominent conservative youth movement. Quite a trajectory. From, pretty humble beginnings, TPUSA grew incredibly influential. By 2023, get this, the organization and its lobbying arm had a total revenue of $92.4 million. That's according to the New York Times. And they had chapters at 850 colleges. They became known for hosting these buzzy events with major political figures, President Trump included. Kirk himself, he was often described as having a bulldog tenacity, a fierce commitment to free markets, small government. And he had this bellicose and fiery style. He wasn't afraid to challenge what he saw as bad ideas on campuses. And that earned him, significant acclaim, especially from Maggie supporters. Now, The Economist, how did they frame him? They called him a tribune of the right, someone unafraid to defend conservatism against an imagined horde of blinkered libtards. Strong words. His influence, particularly among young people, seemed undeniable. There was a TikTok survey, for instance, finding him the most trusted individual on that platform for Trump voters under 30 in 2024. The article also notes that Kamala Harris's margin of victory among 18 to 29-year-olds. It shrank by 12 points in 2024 compared to Joe Biden's back in 2020. That's a big shift. And apparently Trump credited Kirk for contributing to his improved showing with younger voters. No. So The Economist paints this picture of, immense, almost singular influence, particularly on that youth vote. But seeing such a strong correlation in a complex political world, how do we really untangle what's truly causal there? Is it ever that simple?
That's such a vital question. It's fascinating, isn't it, how quickly we sometimes jump to those causal conclusions when we talk about influence. I mean, while Kirk certainly had significant reach, real impact, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really important to remember claims like him single-handedly swinging the youth vote. They're suggestive, not proven. That's the key phrase from the background material. It points out that, yes, there was a shift in the youth vote, absolutely, but it wasn't uniform. It varied across gender, education levels, even different states. So the picture is just far more nuanced, much more complex than a direct cause and effect that maybe the Economist article sort of implies. His influence was real, no doubt, but attributing a direct, decisive swing like that requires a much more careful look at all the converging factors. It's a whole ecosystem, not just flipping one switch.
That's a really important clarification. It definitely highlights the need for careful interpretation, especially when, let's face it, simple explanations are often more appealing. This naturally leads us to another escalating issue that the Economist article really zooms in on, political violence. It paints a pretty stark picture, noting a disturbing increase in assaults, near misses, and threats in recent years, end quote. And the article lists quite a few chilling examples. An arson attack targeting Josh Shapiro, the Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, a thwarted plot, remember this, to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, Michigan's governor, another plot aimed at killing Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and of course, the brutal attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband back in 2022, and even a reported attempt on President Trump's life at a rally. It's a disturbing list. But despite these alarming incidents, The Economist also points out something else, that surveys consistently suggest Americans overwhelmingly reject political violence. Less than a tenth endorse it, apparently. And what's more, that support, low as it is reported as roughly the same on the left and right. So on the surface, that sounds somewhat reassuring, right? Most people reject violence, and it seems balanced across the spectrum. But I guess I wonder, does survey data always capture the full reality when it comes to actual violence?
That's precisely the critical distinction we have to make. And it's a place where precision really, really matters. While The Economist is absolutely right that public attitudinal support for violence, what people say is low and looks symmetrical in surveys, we need to carefully distinguish that attitudinal support symmetry from what we call empirical asymmetry in lethal incidents. It's a bit of jargon, but it's important. What's crucial here, and frankly quite stark, is that in recent years, the body count tells a profoundly different story. According to tallies compiled by the Anti-Defamation League, they track extremist violence. Virtually all identified extremist murders in the U.S. have been linked to far-right actors. Let me repeat that. Virtually all. This includes all extremist killings in 2022, 2023, and again in 2024, based on their data. So while surveys might suggest both sides have similar tolerance in theory, the incident data shows a stark empirical difference in who is actually carrying out lethal violence. Rachel Kleinfeld at the Carnegie Endowment offers a powerful insight here. She notes that individuals looking for purpose, maybe feeling adrift, can be moved by public talk that validates hurting someone for some grand historical mission. And Rob Willer's research at Stanford is also key. It shows that elite condemnation of violence and, importantly, correcting misperceptions people have about how much their rivals tolerate violence, these are crucial factors in actually reducing support for it.
Wow, that's a staggering figure. Virtually all. And a really vital clarification between attitudes and actions. It makes me wonder then, what does this significant empirical asymmetry mean for how we perceive the threat? Where should our focus really lie? It sounds like we need to be incredibly careful not to let survey symmetry obscure the reality of lethal violence. But also, what can we actually do about it? Well, Charlie Kirk himself had a strong belief about the role of discussion here. He famously argued, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. Okay. This idea suggests that vigorous debate, even confrontational debate, is essential for preventing things from escalating. And the Economist piece seems to kind of align with this, maybe implying that more debate inherently leads to less violence. Kirk's idea, and the Economist implied agreement, almost makes vigorous debate sound like a silver bullet against violence. But is it really that straightforward? Does simply more debate automatically mean less violence? Or are there important catches?
It's a compelling idea, definitely, and a common one. But if we, again, connect this to the broader research base, it's actually cooler on this idea than a simple direct link. The background material argues that debate prevents violence only with guardrails. That's the crucial part. It emphasizes that elite rhetoric matters immensely. When leaders from one's own political side, co-partisan leaders, use threatening or dehumanizing language, well, support for violence actually goes up. Now, condemnation from leaders helps counter this, absolutely. But let's be honest, it's often inconsistent, isn't it? So the antidote isn't just debate alone. It's debate plus norm setting by elites and de-escalatory cues.
Yeah.
It's not just that we talk, but how the conversation is framed and shaped, especially by those with influence and power, the quality, the tone, the framing of the discourse that's just as important as having the discourse itself. Without those guardrails, intense debate could actually make things worse, not better.
That's a really important nuance. So it's not just talk more, it's talk responsibly, especially if you're a leader. The how matters as much as the what. Okay, now, turning back to the tragic event itself, Kirk's murder. The Economist article details the specifics of what happened, but interestingly, it doesn't really delve deeply into the physical security side of things. Given he was shot from a rooftop, that feels like a pretty significant gap in the discussion, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it raises a really important question that the article, well, it just kind of missed. How do we protect speech, even vigorous, combative speech, without accidentally shutting it down? The background material really fills this gap. It highlights the security context the piece skips. We know the shot at Utah Valley University reportedly came from an elevated position, right, outside the immediate event perimeter. And it's relevant, perhaps, to note that Utah campuses allow permitted carry. And they recently loosened rules about guns on campus. That context matters for the security landscape and response options. This combination really spotlights a different policy area, one that's often overlooked. We're talking about practical things. Careful site selection and overwatch, basically. Checking and securing venues, including those high-up spots. Designing for hardened sightlines to block clear shots. Controlling rooftop access. Using magnetometers, metal detectors for indoor venues. Establishing rapid counter-sniper protocols. Standardizing threat assessments for all high-profile political events. Now, these aren't speech-chilling measures. They aren't meant to silence anyone. Quite the opposite. They are speech-enabling investments. They're designed specifically to protect free expression and the people involved without restricting the actual debate. It's about making spaces genuinely safer for our public discourse to happen.
Right, so creating the conditions for robust debate means thinking just as much about physical safety as rhetorical safety. Okay, so let's try and bring all these threads together for you. We've looked at the complex legacy of a figure like Kirk, the very nuanced reality of political violence attitudes versus actions. We've discussed the crucial role of rhetoric, debate with guardrails, and this often overlooked importance of physical security. So, what are the real civic stakes here for us as citizens? And how should the media approach its responsibility in shaping how we understand these critical, sensitive issues?
Yeah, I think this brings us to a crisper way to frame those civic stakes and media responsibility, especially in this kind of charged environment. For the civic stakes, it seems clear. Condemnation of political violence must be clear and cross-partisan, no ambiguity. And crucially, the research shows it needs to come especially from the public figures most trusted by their own side. That's what actually changes minds and reduces support for violence. Hearing it from your own team matters most. For media responsibility, it's just vital to avoid false equivalence. We absolutely have to distinguish between that attitudinal support symmetry we see in surveys where people say they reject violence equally, and the empirical asymmetry in lethal incidents, which, as we discussed, shows that stark difference in real-world outcomes in the actual body count. Reporting needs to reflect that reality carefully. And finally, for campuses and free speech venues, if we genuinely want vigorous, even combative debate to thrive, then universities, event organizers, they need professionalized protective playbooks. This includes those practical things. Careful venue choice, thinking about line of sight control, having credible threat assessment processes. Again, these aren't about stifling speech. They are essential investments that enable rather than restrict free expression by creating genuinely safer environments for it.
The murder of Charlie Kirk is, without doubt, a stark reminder of this volatile intersection between passionate political discourse and the very real dangers of violence. It really forces us, I think, to look beyond simple narratives, to consider the deeper complexities of how we engage with each other, how we secure our spaces for speech, and how leaders in the media truly shape our understanding of threat, of risk, and ultimately of responsibility. So as you reflect on this, maybe consider how we can foster a public conversation that is both robust, challenging even, but also genuinely safe for everyone involved, even when we profoundly disagree. Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.